Yeah. Okay. All right. So it's funny. I have to my notes record and then also I have to just record the video. So I have to
Oh,
do recording twice. Anyway, so that's just a little FYI for podcasting on the back end, some things we have to do for technical stuff. Anyway, so I'm so glad to do another episode of Embrace Your Brand and have another amazing guest on today. Andrea, we've kind of known each other for a while, and I'm so glad that I have met you and got to know you. And now I'm being able to share you out on this podcast and talk with you and dive into your story and just kind of how you've embraced yourself and growth over the last couple of years, because I always am keeping up with the little things that you send out in your emails and I'm going in this direction, I feel called to do this. You seem like you're very in tune with your intuition, and I love that about you. So for my audience today, just go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know what it is that you do.
okay. Thank you for having me, Laura. I appreciate being on your podcast. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Andrea, and I'm an empowerment coach. And that is kind of a glorified way of saying a life and success coach. But I really feel very passionately about empowering others to really fulfill their divine purpose. And I find so often that even if we have something that we feel called to do, oftentimes we have these obstacles or limitations that we bump up against over and over again. And so, what I do is help anyone who is looking to fulfill their purpose really move through those by working on their mindset, by doing the inner healing work, somatic journey that it takes to really show up for themselves and for their business and for their life. So that's what I do. I also host a podcast called The Courage Cast. And yeah, that's a bit about me.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I love what it is that you do, because I feel a lot of times we're trying to search and define, what is it that I'm meant to do? What is that calling? And sometimes if we stumble upon that, we're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that. It takes a little bit of that courageous action and working through some things. And I've had a little bit of the privilege to work with you a little bit, and take some of your advice on some things, especially the one thing we did recently, which was just talking through some mindset things and then doing the affirmations, those 21 days of affirmations and visualizations. And I feel like that has really helped
hmm
me, just doing that. And it's a constant journey, I think it is, where you're trying to kind of retrain yourself of giving yourself that permission to accept what your calling is, and then
Yeah.
also begin to start taking action. So I'm just curious, what really got you into doing this type of coaching?
Well, when I first started coaching, I was really passionate about helping women specifically discover their God given purpose. That was kind of the thing that I was naturally inclined to do. And I found it really exciting and very encouraging to talk to women all the time about their dreams and what they're pursuing. And a lot of women would come to me with like these big things that they wanted to do. And I found over time that I would check back in with them and say, well, how's that going? And they'd say, oh, I'm not doing it. Or gave up or whatever it
Mhm.
was. And I started to go down the path of, trying to discover, well, why are they not doing it? And I realized that it was that they had a belief around who they were, and it did not match the dream. And
Mhm.
so they weren't able to really step into it because the belief of who they were was something completely different. And so I started to work with women on their mindset. And then, of course, realizing that it's more than just mindset, it's also, healing through nervous system regulation and, being able to do that somatic journey as well. And so I kind of combined all of those things, both. discovering your purpose as well as mindset and somatic healing, and just started working with people. So, a lot of that came because of my own journey too. Like, I found that I was struggling myself in a lot of areas and trying to figure out why I was struggling and why it wasn't that I was just taking off like a rocket. And so I realized that there were a lot of things that I had believed to be true about myself that were not true. So that's kind of how I got started in it and why I'm passionate about it. And I think that as we grow and evolve, anyways, I think those dreams also change. And
Mhm.
so we're constantly doing the work to step into something new.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And I think that as we go through a lot of our own journeys, we find things and we pick up on things and we get curious about things. Like you were talking
Hmm.
about, you initially wanted to help women find their purpose, and then you realized even though they found it, they weren't taking that necessary action to start
Yeah.
making it happen. And I had another conversation with a previous guest, and she kind of came up against the same thing of like, well, I could give them all the information and stuff, but they still weren't taking action on it. And so it led her into diving into what is it that's holding them back? Like, what are some of those mindset things and what are things that we can start releasing so they have this freedom to work through that? And you do that as well with lots of different modalities. Like you said, the somatic work, overcoming those mindset, like, limiting beliefs of thinking,
Hmm.
I can't accomplish my dream because I'm not that kind of person. And I am curious. I recently heard this and I'd like to get your take on it. A lot of times with meditation and stuff, we're told to, envision our higher self, our future self.
Hmm.
And um, does that ever come to you as though some people will envision that, but they're like, this future version of myself was like this stranger. Like I can't really relate to that person. How do I
Hmm.
become that person? Like, do they do they sense that, or have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, it is a very fine line, I think. Um,
Mhm,
I personally believe that our higher self really is us. You know,
mhm,
we are her already, but our higher self is also what I term as God consciousness. So our higher self is what is connected to source,
mhm,
to creator, to God. And that when we are tapped into that connection, that divine connection, that is when we really feel limitless. Like we can do anything because it's beyond us, anyways, right? So we're not responsible for the outcome of everything because we're tapped into God consciousness, we're tapped into the divine. Whereas when we're trying to do everything on our own, it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to do everything in my own efforts, in who I am today, versus, maybe who you were 2 years ago. And the reality of it is anything is possible with God. So when we're tapped in and connected to what is called the higher self, is just a fancy way of saying God consciousness, connected to
mhm.
source, connected to divine, but realizing that there is that power in connectedness. And so, I could very easily try and do things on my own, or I can connect into God and be like, okay, how can I step into what it is that is for me?
Mhm.
And I think that's the difference. A lot of people don't see it as God consciousness. They just maybe see it as like a collective consciousness or whatever. But my personal belief is around that our higher power, our source, God. And so that's what I use as called God consciousness.
Yeah. I love that you explained it that way. And I have done just a lot of personal study into that. And when I came across, like I said, it feeling like to some people it's a stranger, like
Yeah.
their brain reacts of like, my higher self is stranger to me. Like I don't know them, I don't resonate with them. But really, you explaining that it's actually yourself. It's
Yeah.
who you already are, but
Absolutely.
it's you tapped into your your God source.
Yeah.
tapped into God because He is that higher power. He can do amazing things through you that you never thought that you could do. And, I'm a firm believer in that and having a good, spiritual foundation of things and just knowing that, it's not always me that is responsible for what the outcome is going to be or how
Mhm.
things are going to happen. Cause I can look back in my life and tell you so many times where I'm like, I was stressed out. I had no idea how anything was going to work, but then it worked out practically perfect in ways that I never would have imagined, you
Right.
know? And so I believe that that's what that is. And when you look at it from a viewpoint of looking forward, I think, you're able to overcome those beliefs that are limiting you because they limit you more when you think of it's just me doing it by myself.
Mhm.
They kind of those obstacles are broken through when you think it's not me doing it alone, it's me doing it with God. And with God there is no limits.
Yes. And it's funny because like I think we look in time, like, we think, oh, we're at this age or this stage of life. But really like time is a construct. It's a man-made construct. So, we are born into the world, but we've always been and what we are going to be anyways. So
Mhm.
even as before we're even brought onto the earth, we are already what it is that we are becoming. It's just we haven't actually lived it yet in that 3D sense. And so it's one of those things where it's kind of like we get to choose whether or not we step into it. Because sometimes people, you wonder, like, well, why do they not fulfill their purpose or accomplish their goals? They may have chosen not to. They may have chosen
Mm.
not to step into it, but it doesn't mean that they weren't purposed already
Yeah.
for something divine. They just have made a conscious decision to not do it. Um, and it could be just because they believed circumstances and they fell into a victim mindset around it and felt like, well, this is my perspective on what my life is going to look like. And they didn't find any way out of it.
Mm.
But every person, every single person is has been given a purpose. Like every single person. And I don't mean a purpose just like in to fulfill it as though to do something, but in who you are and what we're here on the earth for. Um and I guess like a lot of the times like when I think about, even coaching or walking through life with people, it's interesting because you may do something completely differently than you're doing now 10 years from now, but it's
Mhm.
still the same purpose as what you had today. It just looks
Yeah.
different. And so it doesn't matter if it's like one day it's owning a business and another day it's motherhood and another day it's this. It's like the same purpose. It's just outworked differently depending on where you are in your journey of life. So, because even when you're old, just because you can't do anything like you were doing in, 20s, 30s, and 40s and 50s, have I say that, about to turn 50, um, that you don't have any purpose anymore. You absolutely do. It just looks very different. And
Yeah.
and it's all important, all of it.
Yeah. And I resonate with that a lot and just to really agree with you on, I think we get in this stigma of thinking my purpose is one thing.
Yeah.
What I'm here for is one thing. And it's like, that can't really be true because we're kind of very multifaceted human beings. We do a lot of
Yeah.
different things. Like you said, it's like, I juggle working a part time job, I juggle being a mom and a wife and a business owner, a podcast host. It's like all these different things. They're all serving a purpose, like you said,
Yes.
and they're just doing it in different ways for different people. And there's seasons in your life where you're meant to do one thing and seasons where you're meant to do something else. People come in and out of our lives all the time and we never know exactly how they're impacted by us, but there was a purpose of
Mhm.
knowing each other or doing something for one another. It's just we may not always know what that is, but I think embracing each season and each moment and each role as we get into that is important because if you're helping someone to discover what their purpose is, it's kind of like I think of it in terms almost like a mission statement.
Mhm.
It's open, but there's just kind of this directional energy of like, this is what I'm really passionate about and what I really want to do. But there's so much that you could do with that.
Oh, yeah. And you could take any direction.
Yeah.
Really, like, and I think with the understanding of like even human design, which was even more interesting to me because, beyond just purpose was like, oh, okay, I'm wired for certain things. And starting to realize where I maybe flourish a bit more if I'm doing certain things or not doing certain things or how I'm doing them, but the purpose is still the same no matter
Mm.
what, for me, and it would be for anyone else too. Just our wiring and how we do it and how we outwork it is going to look different, but
Yeah.
not better or worse than anyone else. So,
Yeah, yeah. We all have our gifts and talents, and
yeah,
even though two of us may do the same thing, we do it a little bit differently, or we do it with a different purpose in mind,
yeah.
you know? And I like that you brought into human design because that was something that when I learned about my own, I realized, like, oh, this is why I naturally tend to these certain things. Like, I'm kind of a compulsive organizer on things where I want to get things looking neat and orderly
Mhm.
because then I can manage it better. I can other understand things better, even when it's gathering information. You know, my husband and I have been talking about our dream house and kind of planning those things out. And I literally just started a vision board on Canva with it. And I have everything neatly outlined, kind of per room of what kind of inspirational photos and things that I want in there. And it's my way of organizing this future goal, this dream, this idea. And I do that with a lot of things that I do. You know, whether it's doing events, I help with a nonprofit event that happens every year in our little town, and just even other little things when it comes to brand design and stuff. It's all organizing bits and pieces of information and simplifying it, making it look pretty, and just keeping it well organized. And so that is essentially like my talent, my thing that
Yeah.
I keep going back to of like managing and organizing and so that's my way, I believe, of accomplishing my purpose. I'm here to kind of simplify some chaos. I'm here to give organization to things, create a
We need that.
system. Yeah. Yeah.
Trust
And
me, we need
everybody
it.
has, yeah, everybody has their own, and I think that's one of the amazing things of actually being able to find and to discover and just learn so much about yourself of like, what are my natural talents? What are things that I'm really good at doing? And then how can I use those to impact the life of someone else, my own life, my own community, and even some people in grander scales of like, you can affect millions of people with something that you know how to do and do
Mhm.
well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And we can even when I was a teacher, I recognized that, working with one student is even more impact than I thought it was going to be because that student is then going to impact many other lives. And so I realize it's like, I think sometimes we think, oh, I need to be bigger than I am. But really, it's just what do you have in your hands to do now? Doing that with intentionality and purpose and then trusting that whoever's impacted by that is also going to do that, and affect other people. And that becomes an even bigger, I think, scale. And in our lifetime, we impact so many people because of that. And we may
mhm.
think, oh, I've just only had direct contact with a few people, but those few people have also had contact with people. So it is way further reaching than what we would even see for ourselves.
Yeah.
And probably that we'll ever know.
Oh, I definitely agree. And, I think there are a few rare moments like when you've impacted someone and somehow later down the road, you just find out how impactful that is.
Yeah.
And I think whenever you can tell someone if they've taught you something, if you learned something from them, if, they helped you go through something and become better from it, if you can go back and just tell them that, that's going to just empower them more to keep doing what they're meant to do.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who we were at an event and she just gifted me a little book that was on like 30 days of prayer. I went through that entire book, and by the time I finished it, I had to message her. I was like, I really appreciate you sending me this. Like, this has impacted me so much. And she's like, I was literally just praying the night before, like, God, what more do I need to do? How can I impact people more? And she's like, and your response to me, your comment to me was timely because the next morning I had texted her that, and she's like, I know that these little bitty things that I'm doing are making impact, you know, and
Yeah, that's
it
awesome.
was months ago that she had given me that, and I had finally went through it and responded to her, and it's like it was an answer to her
Yeah.
prayer. And even another example, I led kind of like a women's Bible study on the loving your husband, and there was a girl in there who, participated some. I would see a couple comments from her, but she stuck with the study. She went through the book that we were all going through. And then a couple of months ago, she posted a photo and she tagged me because she's like, because I went through this study, she's like, it has totally changed my outlook on marriage. She's like, my marriage is better for it and all these things. And I'm so glad that Laura hosted this. And I'm like, wow, it's good
You're
to
like, who
know
knew?
that, yeah, it's like, it's good to know that, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, because it's something that I started or initiated. It made impact for somebody. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to do that more. Like, what else can I do? Whether I see the good coming from it or not,
Hmm.
knowing that I'm fulfilling my purpose. And I think that's something that I think you and I can both agree with. Like, we want that for every single person. Like, find your purpose, find what you love, find out how it can impact people, even in small ways. Like, don't discredit the little small things that you can do that can just make those little ripple effects.
Yeah. I love that story. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very humbling and just it definitely brought a big smile to my face of like, oh, it's so nice to know that, somebody else's life has been positively affected for this and whatever changes or, you know, impact they're having on someone else because of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty awesome. So just to kind of keep the conversation going a little bit before we wrap up, um, I would love to know, like, what are some things that um, you see, your clients really struggling with when it comes to like some of the common blocks and things, just to maybe give the listeners like, some I don't know, some common problems
Yeah.
and maybe some simple solutions to like,
Okay.
give them some
And
value they
simple
can
solutions.
somewhat
uh,
simple solutions. I
okay.
know it's an ongoing thing, but yeah.
Yeah. You know, interestingly enough, one thing that I've seen over and over again, and I'll make it a little bit more broad, but is this tendency to want to please our family of origin or our spouse or partner. And that being a huge hang up or limitation for people in business. Um, it can look like how they grew up, or things they learned around working hard, or it can look like how we spend money, or how we invest, or how we do things. And often, I think we hear in our family of origin, that's the way we do it. That's the, when you're in this family, this is how we do it. Variations on that particular
Mhm.
phrase. But I find with clients that comes up a lot. It's not something that's talked about all the time in entrepreneurship, but as soon as we start doing mindset work, it starts showing up and clients start talking about, I don't feel like I can do this because I have a belief around this, whether it's about money or working, or how they show up, what they say, how like it literally crosses every single limitation because of the fear that their family of origin or their partner, depending on who that might be. Like sometimes it's not their partner, sometimes it's just a family of origin, but sometimes it is, it just really depends on the person. Um, Really getting hung up on that need to have the approval of their family, or to not upset the family, or to not do anything outside of the boundaries of what the family of origin does. And that's a hard thing for most entrepreneurs because not only do they have to shift their belief around it, but a lot of times they have to have hard conversations
Mm,
because then there has to be boundaries drawn around what is going to be tolerated within their relationships, or what kind of conversations they're going to have, or how much input they're going to take from their family from here on out. And I'll tell you what, that stops a lot of entrepreneurs because of the fear of like, well, what are they going to say? And I'm talking, I kid you not, it's not just 30-year-old entrepreneurs or 20-year-old entrepreneurs. They're in their 40s, they're in their 50s, they're in their 60s, and they're still hung up on
mm,
things that their family has done, ways of being. And I think I was surprised at how pervasive it was, but almost every single person I work with, that comes up. So you said a simple solution.
if there is one, yeah.
Okay, so I would say a simple solution is to start being aware of what it is that you believe to be true. And this is going to be something that you unpack when you start to see it showing up in your life, and take it moment by moment. Doesn't mean you have to like completely have like this, boundary drawing conversation with your family members and be like, you can't do anything, don't talk to me anymore. Don't say anything to me anymore. I don't want to hear your advice. But it really is about becoming aware of what it is that you believe to be true about yourself, knowing that as you shift and change, you are generationally shifting and changing, going forward and
Mhm,
backward. So the inner healing work helps spiritually and energetically shift anything that goes after you, but also what came before you. And that is amazing. So if you really think about it, there's a lot of times where I've done inner healing work and never had a conversation with my parents about it and had a noticeable shift in the relationship, and think, oh my gosh, like how did that actually happen? But it happened because I did the work. Not because we had a conversation around it, but because when I shifted and changed and started showing up differently, naturally things started to shift and change as well. That brought about healing in their lives as well. And things changed. There are also times where I had to have hard conversations with them uh, because I needed to. And, but that I was usually working with a coach at that time and walking through that with somebody, not just like haphazardly having the conversation. So, um, having said all that, I would say create awareness around what it is that you believe and take it one step at a time. That's the simple
yeah,
answer.
that's really good because, as you were talking about just those underlying things of what comes up due to family members, to partners, spouses, people we associate with a lot. I've seen this for myself of just things that I took on or frames of mind that I took on based on my upbringing. It just goes back to the fact of like who you spend a lot of time around.
Hmm.
You take on their beliefs, you take on their ways of being. And not that those are inherently wrong, but sometimes they do hold us back. And I think, like you said, just becoming aware of those, of like just questioning, basically just questioning, like, okay, I feel like I need to hustle. Let's just use that for an example. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like I need to hustle and work a lot because that's what I've seen my family do.
Hmm.
And, question yourself, why do I think that? Because I've seen my family do it.
Hmm.
Well, why do they do it? Is this actually serving me? Is it not serving me? Like you said, just that awareness of it can start to open up these possibilities. As we question things, our mind is going to answer.
Yeah,
you know, any
absolutely.
question we bring to ourselves, our mind will answer for us. And then we can just kind of keep digging a little deeper. Why do I believe that? Why do I think that is true? If I think that is true, what am I doing about it? Is this good for me? Is this not good for me? There's so many different ways you could go about it. And you're the coach. You know how to guide people through those experiences of how do we unpack this? And then how do we begin to start shifting this in a way that actually serves you and helps you live out your purpose versus hindering you from making progress? to that.
And you
So
know what? 9 times out of 10, the family member is actually supportive.
yeah.
But it doesn't appear that way. And so, but if you ask the whoever it is, the entrepreneur, they'll say, "Yeah, I think my mom does, support me, or my husband does support me, or my dad, or whomever it is." But the way that they're showing up in the relationship around it can be very defensive, and it feels very defensive. And a lot of the times our family members do want what's best for us, but they also have fear
Mhm.
for us. And they are projecting their own fear onto us. And so, but they do support, like I said, 9 times out of 10. There are cases where they don't. But I think if once we know that and realize, oh, that's their own journey showing up for them. That's something that they didn't work out. And now it's being projected onto me. I think that's really helpful to know, because then it kind of like releases, like, oh, okay, I have compassion for why they have said that. Not
Mm.
that they have said it, but why they may have said that, or why they're making those comments or acting that way. And that right there can release so much
Yeah.
from, just even relationships that feel difficult. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was about to say, I was like, that what came to mind when you were talking about it is like the pressure that's released
Yeah.
of like, you know, you don't have that expectation of, I have to work in this way. I understand why, they're worried for me, they're fearful for me, but also knowing that it's just their way of kind of being supportive. A lot of times people will be supportive and like, let me tell you all the reasons why that might not be good. And you're like, I don't really want to hear those. I
Yeah.
appreciate you saying those, but like, okay, now can we talk about the things that are
Yeah.
actually good from this? Like we've talked about the cons, let's talk about the pros kind of
Yeah.
thing, you know? But yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I feel like that's such tangible things to really just walk away from this podcast having listened to, of just, knowing where you're at, embracing your journey. That's part of the process, is just unpacking some of those things that we carry with us. And sometimes we're carrying those things and did not even realize that we had those, that those were issues that were showing up. I've done some energetic healing, and so forth. And lots of things are brought to light that I'm like, I had a sense that I was carrying these. I don't think I could have put words to it, but I'm glad that someone else was able to help me do that and just help me work through it and unpack those. 'Cause I'm like, that burden is just lifted and lighter. And I'm like, okay, I know that that was an expectation or something that I thought I had to live up to, and I don't have
Yeah.
to anymore. And that's such a freeing feeling. So I am so glad that you do this type of work with entrepreneurs, with anybody who's just wanting to get through those things so they can really begin to live out their purpose. Because I feel like that's what helps us lead those fulfilling lives. That's what helps us live vibrantly, live joyously, and know that I'm making the best use of my time here. So I
Exactly.
appreciate you so much, Andrea, for
Well, thanks,
being
Laura.
on this podcast today. And I will be sharing any of your links that you have for people to connect with you, to get in touch with you, and to learn more about what you do. Those will all be in the show notes. And I just thank you so very much, Andrea.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate